Hey everyone, this is Nico Earnshaw, and today's video is going to be all about creating UIs for the Decentraland scene. So UIs have always been a bit of a challenge. It's always been one of the hardest parts whenever you're coding a scene. And that is why today we're unveiling this brand new library, which is going to make that a whole lot easier. Of course, this library is a set of tools that simplify a series of what we think are common use cases. But there's always a trade-off, of course, right? With great power comes great complexity, and these tools are a trade-off in the way of making things simpler yet less powerful, of course. But we believe that the trade-offs that we did while picking all of these tools make a lot of sense in the context of creating scenes. So yeah, this is the library. We have it in a repository in Decentraland/Decentraland UI utils. And you can find a full README with all of the different functions that are methods that are exposed by this library in this repository. And we're going to go through several of these as we edit one of our existing example scenes in order to give it a little bit more life. We're going to add a health bar, we're going to add some prompts, and as you'll see, this all will take quite few lines of code. I mean, it's going to be quite light and quite easy on my side to create all of this content. So this new library has been released just today, and you can now already install it in any scene by simply running the following command: npm I @Decentraland/UI utils, and that will install the library inside one of your Decentraland scene projects. The scene that we'll be working on today is one of our old example scenes. In fact, it's the one that I worked on a webinar that I did last week, which is the puffer scene. So this is a scene where you basically have a puffer fish that puffs up whenever you click on it or whenever you walk near it. And with these UI little things, we're going to give it a bit more life and make it a bit more fun. So before I dive into changing things, let me show you what it is that we're working from as a starting point. So let's do DCL start. And again, the scene that I'm working from is literally the same scene that we have here in the example scenes. So if you want to try all of these things out, you can start off from downloading this scene and working from there. The only things I've changed are I have, as you just saw, ran the installation command to install this UI library, and also in this folder I added a couple of folders. Actually, I added one folder with just a few images that I'm going to use as part of the UI. But that is entirely up to you, and you can add your own images, and I'll show you where you can find several of these. So I just added these images that we'll soon see how they come into play into our scene. So this is the scene, and here's our friendly fish. If we walk near it, it's not so friendly, it starts getting all prickly. And if I click on it, that also happens. So the scene uses the utils library quite extensively, and all it really does is, one, it creates a trigger area around the fish, which activates this function that makes the fish puff up. And also we have, that is what is happening right here in this part of code. Actually, it might be good to make code a bit bigger. Hopefully with that it's easier to read. So with this bit of code here, we are activating the inflate fish function. And also when we click on the fish, we are activating the same inflate fish function. And this function basically uses the utils library to change the scale over time, then add a delay and change the scale over time again. But we're going to treat this function as a black box. This is of no concern to what we're doing today with this UI library. So yeah, that's these two functions here are all the context we really need for what we're going to work on today. Great. So as we just did before, we install our library, and now all we have to do is call this import so that these tools are available to use inside my scene. And now I go to the end of my file and do UI dot, and this will expose all of the different functions and types that are available in this new library. So let's start with something pretty simple. Let's go with display announcement and write hello world. And that's all I really need to do. And if I get back to my scene, there we go. It says hello world. And this function displays this text, whatever I write, for a default time of 3 seconds. Now, all of these functions will always have a set of required fields and some optional fields. So if I keep going, as you can see, the first field is the value, which is the text that would appear, but I can also set a different duration. By default, it's 3 seconds. I can also make this silent. I don't think you're hearing the audio from my computer, but this function, whenever these notifications appear, there is a bit of a notification sound, which I can turn off if I want. I can also change the color, I can change the size of the text, and I can remove these black borders that appear in the outlines of the words as a stylistic option. So yeah, I'm completely free to modify all of these things, and right now what I want to do is I want to take this function that gets called whenever we walk near the fish, sorry, this function here, and besides inflating the fish, let's write ouch. Let's have it display for 1 second. Let's keep it, let's make it silent, even though you guys, I don't think you'll be hearing the difference, but trust me, it's not going to make a sound. Let's make it red, so and let's make it a little bit larger. Start as 35 as a font size. So now whenever I walk near a fish, I should be seeing, yeah, that sign that says ouch. Just a bit smaller. Let's make it a bit bigger. 35 turns out to be quite a bit smaller than I thought it would. Let's make it 60. So there we go. Great. Okay, awesome. So let's move on to something else. Let's add a ammo counter. So let's pretend that we're actually shooting harpoons at our fish, just to make things a bit more, a little action going on. So I will create a counter. So new UI counter. And this again will take several parameters, but only the first one is really needed, which is the initial value. So let's say that I have 10 harpoons. And with that, we already have something that is valid. And the UI counter will always start in the bottom right of our scene. So there we have it, and it's a bit hard to read with all of these stats here. These stats, by the way, are only available when we run a preview. They won't be there when we're on a scene. So actually, it would be fine to keep it here, but for more clarity, let's move it up. So the next two fields that we can set are the X offset and the Y offset. These are always measured in number of pixels away from the corner. It's always going to be on the bottom right corner. And so we want it higher up in the Y-axis and at the same level in the X-axis. So the X offset is going to be 0, and the Y offset, let's try with 80. And let's make the color yellow, why not? Let's see how that works out. Oh, great. Okay, so now that we have this ammo object created, we can actually interact with it. So for example, let's create a global click event. So with this, we're gonna listen to every time that the player hits the pointer button, so the mouse button, and we can run this function regardless of what the player was hitting. So let's go action button dot pointer, because we can also do the same for the E and the F keys. Next field is false, which refers to using raycasting. We don't really need that right now. And then comes the actual function that we're going to call every time that a button down event is detected for the pointer button. And now let's reference our ammo object that we just created. And this object exposes several functions, and one of them is increase, another one is decrease. We can also set specific values, but right now let's go for decrease. If we don't pass any parameter, it's going to decrease by 1, but we could also decrease it by a set number. So now, every time that we click, you see that the number lowers by 1, even if we are also activating other things when we click. Of course, if I keep clicking, it's going to go into the negative numbers, and that doesn't really make sense. It's not like, you know, I'm owing harpoons to the bank or something. So it will really make a lot more sense if I added some kind of logical check, so which I can do. So if ammo.read, so the read function is going to return the current value of this counter. So if this number is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to return and not do anything. So if I try now, let's quickly run out of ammo, and you can see that I can keep clicking all I want, but it's going to stay in 0. Awesome. Okay, so another cool thing that this allows me to do is to add icons, which with quite little effort. So I can do an ammo icon. Oops, sorry. Let ammo icon is a new UI dot. So there's 3 options here. There's large icon, small icon, and medium icon. I can actually set the size to any specific size I want, but the nice thing is that these 3 come at predefined sizes, and I don't need to set any of the properties to make the size right. So in this case, the medium icon is 64 by 64 by default. If you guys want a great source to find icons in the web, by the way, this page I found is actually a really useful one. So it has a lot of free different resources. Like for example, I searched for harpoon, and I found like a bunch of things. Like it has all of this, and all of these are free open source, and if I go open any of these, it's actually available in all of these different sizes, which is extremely convenient. Or I can go with health, and yeah, I'm gonna find a bunch of different things, and yeah, I can download them in different formats. In this case, I'm always gonna use PNG as a download format, and as I wanna show these as icons on the UI, I'll always go for relatively small sizes, like say 64 by 64 or 32 by 32 or 128 by 128. By the way, when using images in Decentraland, it's always preferable to go for these types of values, the squares of 2 kind of values. And that is because the engine deals with these image sizes a lot better, and that will always lead to scenes running a lot better. So I have downloaded these icons to this folder here. I downloaded a harpoon icon here and a heart icon here, and both of these are 64 by 64, so I can freely add these into my scene with the medium icon. So this function is gonna ask me for, first of all, the path to my image, and then I can set X and Y offsets, and if I want, I can also like change the size at which it's displayed, and even cut out a section of the image if I want to use some kind of a sprite sheet, which we'll see later. So our harpoon image is in images/harpoon.png, and we probably will want to change the offset a little, so let's go with -30, because again we're moving in this direction away from the corner in the x-axis, and when we move upwards it's a positive number because we're also moving away from the corner, but you know, upwards. So -30, and we want it to be aligned with our counter here, which was at a height of 80, so that's copy that. So with just that little bit of code, we can easily display an icon in our UI. Can we? Why not? Maybe I'm not... images. Ooh, I was missing an S there. That's why it wasn't recognized in the path. There we go. Awesome. There it is. Okay, so yeah, should probably make it a bit more offset, maybe -70. Another nice thing I can do with this library is, there we go, is to add some labels in the same corner of the UI. So let's go with ammo label is new UI dot corner label, and again the first parameter is the value. Let's go with ammo, and we have the same x and y offsets. Let's go with -70, and let's display this on top of the other values, so it's be more than 80. Let's go with 120 and see. Well, yeah, it's not exactly where I want it, but we're getting there. Let's go with 140, and actually let's also make it yellow as the counter so that it's more consistent. Cool. Okay, so it's not beautiful because I'm not a UI designer and I'm not going to try to be, but through these tools you can actually get a lot closer to a prettier UI with minimal effort. Okay, awesome. So another nice thing that you can do with this library is to have a health bar or a bar of whatever kind you want. It can represent whatever you want, but similar to the counter, we can do a health bar, let's call it, and this would be UI bar, and this function will take, first of all, a value, which is always a value from 0 to 1, so it represents how much of the bar is going to be full. In this case, let's start with 0.8 just to show how it looks. And once again, we're going to set the x and y offsets. Let's go with a -30 in the x, and let's go with 170 in the y. Why not? And what else is necessary here? The fill color is yeah, so I can set a fill color of red, which, by the way, oops, sorry, which would be the, oh, silly me, I got the new UI bar because I'm instancing a new instance of a UI bar. That's why I wasn't liking what I was writing. Awesome. And there we have it, and that is our health bar. We can shift it up just a little bit higher up, and we can also change other parameters. Like, for example, we can set a style. We have several default styles, so by default it's going to look like this gray, but if we want, we can do bar styles dot round black, for example, and so that's going to look quite different. There you have it. Or yeah, there's several different options. I'm gonna stick with round silver, which is the default, and I think it looks pretty nice with this. But just like we had with our counter, we can also change the values of our health bar quite easily. So let's look again once more for the function where the fish is being inflated. And the same place where we're doing this ouch, we can actually change the value of our health and make that really affect our health in a more real way. So health bar dot decrease, and this function again by default is going to decrease by a value of 0.1, but I could do it by 0.2 or whatever else I prefer. So if I play this again, if I go near the fish, ouch, and as you can see, the health bar actually dropped. If I do that again, I keep dropping, and now I'm dead. There's of course nothing happening right now, but I could make something happen whenever I die. And that's what we'll do in a little bit. But before I do that, let's add a second health bar and have a health bar to represent our not so friendly little fish. So let's do exactly the same that we did here. But of course so let's start with 1. Let's set it somewhere else. Let's say that it's at minus 140. I'm purely guessing here. It's probably not going to be in the greatest of places, but you know, this is all just to explain the mechanics. I'm not trying to make this look pretty at this stage. That would be a different stage of polishing, which I don't want to bore you with. Let's make his bar purple because, you know, it kind of matches the fish. And let's make the style of the margins of a health bar black. So there we have it. We have our own health bar in red and the fish's health bar in purple. Awesome. So now we want to affect this fish's health, and we can change that value whenever we click on the fish. So far, whenever you click on the fish, all we're doing is making the fish buff up, but we could also change that here and go with a decrease. And yeah, let's keep the default value of 1 whenever you click on the fish. And now let's also add a little condition. Let's say that if fish health dot read is less or equal to 0, then let's remove let's remove our fish entirely from the scene. Let's go with remove entity and puffer, which is the name of the entity for the fish. Because yeah, we just killed the fish, we just removed it from existence. So if I get near a fish, it's gonna hurt me, but if I fire at the fish, there we go, the fish is gone. Nice. Okay, so let's go into something a little bit more elaborate, just slightly more elaborate. And let's start with some notification pop-ups. So this library includes a few different pop-ups that you can add. And again, all you have to do is set a couple of parameters and it takes care of everything to do with that. You don't need to think about aligning the buttons and the text in the right way. It just presents them in a decently pretty layout. So let's go back to this function where you were dying, right here. Yes, so once you decrease your health, let's once again go with an if health bar dot read is less or equal to 0. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna create a prompt, an OK prompt, and this prompt is just gonna say you're dead. Oh yeah, again, it's a new OK prompt. So if I am dumb enough to let the fish kill me by getting stung by it like 5 different times, I will be dead. There we are. So these prompts also have several different fields that you can configure. For example, the onAccept function lets you set what happens whenever you click on the OK button. By the way, these are also activated. So the OK button can also be activated by hitting the E key on the keyboard without necessarily needing to drive the cursor towards the button. And whenever it is activated, it also produces a little sound, which is also a nice little detail which helps, you know, make the UI feel more, you know, professional, let's say. So in this case, let's make something happen when you accept. Let's create a function that actually displays another prompt that is going to ask us a question, and it's going to ask us if we want to keep playing or play again. So let's go with create an option prompt, and let's make the question, do you want to play again? And oh, sorry. So this has actually one field for a title and another one for instructions. So actually, let's do one thing. Let's get rid of our option prompt for now, because it's actually better to do this as directly as an option prompt instead of an OK prompt. So let's go with new option prompt. Let's make the title "You Are Dead," and the smaller font description says, "Do you want to play again?" And now we're gonna define what happens if you accept this option. So this is gonna present two buttons, one to accept and one to reject. And if we accept, then we're gonna do stuff to play again, which we will do right now. But first of all, let's show you how that looks. This option prompt also has a couple of other options. You can also set a function in case you reject. In this case, since we don't set anything, it will just close the window and nothing would happen. But otherwise, you could, have an actual consequence to rejecting. Or you could even make the two options not framed as, accepting or rejecting something, but rather choosing A or B, depending on what is better. And we can also set the text on these buttons to be whatever we want. So by default, it's going to be OK and cancel. But if we want, we can label them option A and option B, or whatever we want. So do you want to play again? Let's make, so the function that is executed when you cancel, let's make that just null. But let's change the text, this OK text, to yes, and the reject text to no. And the final so the final field is use dark theme, which is actually a field that is in all of these prompt little prefabs, and we can actually change the style of these UIs to use a dark theme, which I actually think looks quite a bit cooler than the default one. So I always try to use this. So now when I get killed, yeah, I'm really bad at this game, as you can tell. Yeah, it's now in a dark theme, and the options read yes and no. And if I press yes, we still haven't coded anything, but we can first of all bring the fish back. Identity buffer, and we can also set our all of our values back to their defaults, right? So we can get the ammo and do set to 10. So instead of increasing or decreasing, we're just gonna set to a fixed value without really caring about what the previous value was. And the same can be done with our health bar, set to 1, and the fish health as well, let's set it to 1. Awesome. So if we play again, see that if I get killed once again and I want to play again, everything is reset back to its original values. Nice. Okay, so the third and final kind of predefined prompt window we can do is an input prompt, and I couldn't think of anything that really went with the theme of this scene, so I'm just gonna do something pretty meaningless in the context of the scene, just to show it off. So the title is yeah, say something or whatever, and we can have a function that gets called whenever you hit the OK button. So this dialog is going to include two things. It's going to include, or three things rather. It's going to include a title, it's going to include a box in which I can write text, and it's going to include a submit button. And this function is what gets executed whenever I hit the submit button. But the beauty of this is that this function can use the values that we write into the fill-in box. So yeah, thanks to that, you can actually use that in more interesting ways. So for example, let's go with UI.display announcement and just show an announcement of whatever was written into the input box. So if I start the scene once again, there we have our prompt, say something or whatever, and I can write whatever and submit that, and here we have our text displayed as part of the UI. Of course, you could grab that text and send it to a database and store player names or whatever it is you want to do to take advantage of that. And finally, you can also create your own custom prompts. So these are the easy, straightforward prompts you can create, like with minimal components, but you're also able to create your own prompts that may have their own like predefined bits and pieces. So these prompts can have like a different shape. You can even choose a slanted shape, which is pretty cool. You can add as many text fields as you want, as many buttons as you want. You can add like checkboxes, different switches, or as many text boxes to fill in as well. And yeah, it makes it a lot more powerful, and it isn't all that hard to code either. So let's go with new UI dot custom prompt, and in this case all we're really picking is the style, prompt style, and I'm gonna go with the dark slanted, which is quite cool, I think. And if you want, you can pick specific width and height like measurements, but those kind of stretch out the textures, so I don't recommend doing that. It is an option nevertheless if you really need to. So actually I should be having a pointer to my prompt. So the prompt is this, and now we can do prompt dot add text, for example, and we can actually I'm gonna just straight up copy what I have here in this example because I don't want to spend too much time on this. Oops. So here I'm adding text. I'm adding a second text. In the first text I actually set the color to red. I added a checkbox and I added a button. And I could actually, I'm gonna just now do something a bit more interesting with this, but let's start with this. So, welcome, this game contains explicit violence towards fish, and you can check the box that says, I understand firearms are dangerous, and when I check that, this button appears that lets me start the game. So what I'm gonna do actually is, instead of, so the checkbox function has a function that gets executed whenever the checkbox is checked. What I'm actually gonna do is not create the button at that instance, but I'm rather gonna have the button start out as grayed out, and then I'm gonna activate the button. So once I create a button, I'm gonna call the gray out function. That will make the button non-clickable and set the text color to gray rather than white. And then when I add the checkbox, I am actually, let's add a pointer towards my button. So let this button equal to this. So that way I can now refer to this button. And let's go with activate. Oh, interesting. Looks like this is not returning the button as I thought it would. How come it's not? So this would be returning a custom prompt button, right? Oh, because the close function is not returning that, right? Oops, sorry, no. The gray out function is messing with that, maybe. Yeah, that should work. Oh, sorry, it's not activate, it's enable. That's why, yeah, wrong word. So now if I start the scene once again, there we have our button grayed out. I can't click it until I accept the checkbox, and now I can actually click the button and start playing my violent game with violence against fish. Awesome. So the final thing I want to show you guys is that with this library, you can also do what we call a UI dialog prompt. So if you guys have been around Genesis Plaza, you'll notice that you can speak with all of these little cute little robots, and we want to replicate that same kind of interaction in something that you can easily copy into any scene. So we also created a set of functions that allow you to do that same thing with minimal code. So in order to do that, you first need to have a little script written down, which will walk through the different the dialogue tree presented by the character. So I'm gonna start creating this dialogue tree in a different file just to keep things neater. TS, and I'm gonna paste this here. This is a simple dialogue, and I can import the type from this library. So now with this collection of dialogue prompts, I can head back to my game and create an actual dialogue object. So let's go with fish dialog is equal to new UI dot dialog window. And here, when we are instancing a new dialog window, we can set a couple of parameters, which for now we're going to leave blank, but I'm going to head back to them soon. And now we can do dialog dot open dialog window. And when we open a dialog window, we need to pass it two things. We need to tell it what script to use, which refers to this this object we created here, and in what index of that script to start. So let's first of all import this fish talk thing into here. When I copy this, it's gonna tell me that I need to import the object into my file. And let's start with the index 0, which refers to the first line of that dialog. So if I add that, I should have my fish start up saying, "Hey there, I'm a pufferfish." And I can click to advance through all of these little dialogue prompts. And once I click on the last one, it closes. Awesome. Okay, so first of all, let's make this happen not at the very start, so I don't have a whole clutter of things, but let's make it appear only once I have closed the custom prompt window. So here in the button, I'm closing this prompt, and right after that, let's open our dialog. And also let's set a couple of the parameters that we have available when we instance a new dialog. So we have two things we can set. One is to use the dark theme once again, and the other is to have a default portrait. So just like we do in Genesis Plaza, you can show a little image of the character towards the left of the screen, and yeah, that's like a little bit more, it helps you link the character that you're seeing in world to the dialogue. And you can also play with that and have that image change over time. So actually, one of the final image that I have here in my images folder is a sprite sheet that includes a couple of variations of our fish. As you can see, it starts out deflated and gets more inflated. So we're gonna be changing these and switching through these throughout the conversation to have the fish, try to represent different states of its mood. So in order to select just a section of this image rather than the whole image, we're gonna have to section it out. So the default portrait is gonna be type portrait, and that means that it's an object basically, and this object can include a path, which is the path to the file, which is fairly obvious. So images / fish sprite.png, and then we can we can have some offset, so it's going to start roughly around here by default, but we can move it towards the side, up, down, whatever we want. For now, let's just keep it there. So I'm just going to change the other field, which is the section field, which lets me create an object that would also have a few different parameters that lets me select exactly what region of the image I want to copy out. So in this case, I want to have a square that starts on the top right and ends right about here. Since I know that the image has measurements of 768 times 256, I know that, for example, the source height and source width are going to be 256, just for starters. And the source top is going to be 0, so I don't really need to change that. And the source left is also going to be 0. So those two fields are actually optional and they default to 0, so that should work. And there is one more field that I can set here in the dialog window, which is use the dark theme. So yeah, let's go for the dark theme. Whenever available, I like to use it. So let's try our scene again. Once again, I understand that firearms are dangerous. Let's start the game. And here is our dialogue with the fish. And as I click through it, the fish it's going to be still the same image, but we'll see that we will switch it around. Okay, so this dialogue we used here is pretty minimal, but there is actually quite a lot of fields that we can alter here. So if you look at the README, you will see that the schema that is used by this dialog class is actually quite rich. You can change the font, you can offset the text, you can have a different portrait displayed on every one of these frames, and you can even add some conditional logic. Like by default, you're just going to click through different bits of dialogue, but you can also present the player with two options, and whichever option is chosen, you can branch out the dialogue into different parts, and you can even have different functions triggered by whatever one of these options is selected, and that can have consequences that go beyond the conversation. So let's try a more elaborate dialogue. I actually have this one copied out here, and so here we're gonna have a few different things. So the first one of these is straightforward, but the second one already has a different font size from the default, and as we go further we will have a couple of more things. Actually, this is not finished. I'm gonna add a couple of more things to make it more interesting. So the fish starts getting pissed off, so let's change the portrait so that we reflect this. So we're going to use the same portrait that we used, so the same image for the portrait that we used before, except that we're going to have a different section picked out. So yeah, we're going to use the same height and width, but the field that we're going to set now is the source left, so that it is 256, and that way we start cutting our image right around this point and pick this second one of these images. And let's go with the same for the third one of these images, except that this time we're going to pick the third image and go with 512. So we should now see the image change as the fish gets more and more annoyed. And the fish will finally present us with an option. It will ask us what do we want, why are we here, and you can respond that you're just chilling, and in that case the conversation ends there and it's all good. Or you can say that you're here for revenge, and that's where we can make our whole combat system start at that point in the scene. Like we can make this a whole, a peaceful scene until that is triggered by this function here. So yeah, first of all, we gotta point at that. We're still pointing at the original dialogue here. So when we, where is this? When we open up the dialogue, which is here, when you're clicking on the button and the fish dialogue is called to open the dialogue, instead of going with fish talk 1, we're going to go with fish talk 2, which is this second, more elaborate dialogue that we defined here. Now we should see that. Okay, so yes, I understand. Start game. And here we're, hi there, I'm a bufferfish, don't come near. Don't come near or I'll puff up. I mean it. And as you can see, the fish keeps getting bigger. And so there is a default image, so whenever an image is not specified in one of these dialog prompts, it will just go back to default. And since this one was of is question true, then we're presented with actually two options. I should align these better, but yeah, I can choose the E or the F. These again can be triggered by hitting the E and the F keys besides just clicking on the UI. And they will also create different sounds when clicked. And these two fields let me jump to the conversation part 4 or 5 depending on which one of these is pressed. And I set this up so that if you click F, right now nothing happens, but let's make the fish puff up. Let's call the inflate fish function so that the fish gets all pissed off when you tell it that you're here for revenge, for whatever reason that is. Oh, I gotta export this function so that it's available on other files. And once I did that, I should be able to import right in here. Great. Okay, so again. So if I click revenge, something in the world outside the command prompt, outside the dialog system actually happened. So great, that's all I wanted to show today. I really hope that this UI library can help you guys create things that are, you know, a lot more engaging and a lot more closer to real games, let's say. And yeah, if you have any more questions, you can reach out to me, of course. And I will be leaving links to all of this in the chat window and in the YouTube video when this gets posted. So hope you enjoy this and hope to see you soon. Keep creating great stuff. See you.